All right, so I got the recording going, and so today is our technical assistance day. We had initially set this day up to be this day that we were gonna like really dig into Nexus and like go through Nexus from start to finish and like examine all the details and take it kind of screen by screen where people could fill things out as they go. And we were gonna it was just gonna be a grand old party where when we got to the end of it, all that part was either done or substantially started for everybody. That was going to be the morning. We were going to kind of go over anything else with the consolidated application. And then the afternoon was going to be that technical assistance time where individuals could stop in and work through any individual items with Shelly and that sort of thing. So as we know, Nexus has not been released at this point. And so we've very much truncated the day. We're just going to spend a little bit of time all together this morning, this part that I'm recording. And we're just going to go over a few things. Shelly has some items to go over. I have a few items to go over. And when that is completed, then I do have that sign in our agenda where if you would like to do some technical assistance today, there's a couple of spots left. And we'll also talk about other opportunities if for some reason you're not able to get through with some technical assistance today, some other opportunities to get that. So that is it for my little introduction. Shelly, I'll turn it over to you for your first part.
All right. Good morning, everybody. First thing I just want to say is thank you, thank you, thank you. I know this was a rough year. I know you're still wrapping things up, but I really, really appreciate everything you've done. You guys are amazing. Sorry. I know how hard it's been for you guys this year, and I feel bad because I can't do more for you. But anyways, let's get to what I can do. I am so sorry about Nexus. It really, I'm not normally like, it's not our office's fault. I promise you that. Our team has been working so hard. The company promised things that they are not, they have not been able to deliver. And that has been the issue. And I am so, so sorry about that. What I do want you to know, though, is that we are going to be as flexible as possible. I don't want you to worry about your vacations. I don't want you to worry about, not having time off this summer. We will figure this out. I will get you the obligation date of July 1st, as long as you work with me. We will get this done. What I have been recommending to all of my districts that I've been able to speak to one-on-one or in larger groups is that create a spreadsheet. And I know you've probably heard me say this before, but create a spreadsheet. Many of you have already done this in years past. Get your budget items in there. Muskegon's already been working with me very closely, sending me spreadsheets. I've been approving things or getting additional information from them. Tom, I know your district has always done a spreadsheet. Please feel free to send me those at any time. You do not have to wait. I can approve those things. I can make sure you have the correct function codes, the correct object codes. I can ensure you have the correct detail. I just send them to me. I've been taking some time off here and there only because I'm waiting just like you're waiting, but I am more than happy to take a look at those and get that stuff pre-approved. That way when Nexus does open, the hope is to schedule a day like Dave was describing, what was supposed to happen today, where once Nexus opens, we can all get together. You can all open yours. We'll work through it together. And again, have individual help sessions if you need it. But by then you may already have your whole entire budget practically approved because, we've already worked on it. But what I want to remind you is that, now, Dave, I had one question for you. I see in your notes, you have September 1st listed as an official due date for MICIP. Where did that come from?
PA 25.
Okay, I see. Okay. Yeah. All right. So that makes sense. Because in general, whatever's in MICIP at the time you start your consolidated application, your strategies and activities will move into Nexus. MICIP will talk to Nexus. What I don't want you to worry about is when you're working in MICIP, remember, I really am encouraging you just to focus on one overarching goal. Don't worry if it hits everything that you want to purchase with title funds. We're going to talk about that. There's kind of 3 scenarios, and that's what I wanted to talk about this morning. And don't worry about when you're in MICIP, it talks about funding sources. That's there for your planning purposes. And it really is planning only. Because as you start to plan, you think, wow, I might be able to use 31A for this. Oh, I might be able to use Title I for this. Or wait, I might be able to use Title IV. It's okay. It's there for planning. That funding source does not pull in any way to Nexus. So in the end, no matter what is in MICIP for a funding source, you will still be able to build your budget item in whatever funding source works for you in the title world. Okay. So I don't want you to get caught up in that. I don't want you to be worried about that. Just use it as a planning tool. So the three kind of scenarios that'll happen for when I'm trying to approve your budgets is one, if you do get something into MICIP. So if a strategy or activity are in MICIP based on the overarching goal that you've put in there, those activities and strategies get pulled into MICIP. You go into Nexus, you start building a budget, say in Title II. There will be a drop down for your strategy. You will drop that down. You will pick the strategy that was listed in MICIP that came from the strategy bank. And then there'll be an activity drop down. And the activity will be a short type description of what you wanted to do in that strategy. And that activity then will be where you will add the additional budget detail that I typically ask for in the consolidated app, right? So part of your information will come over from MICIP, but then that's where your cutting and pasting might come in handy for those of you doing your spreadsheet, because we will have already worked out all the details. If you send it to me, you can just cut and paste that activity or that budget detail into that activity slot. So that's kind of the first scenario.
Can I pause for a sec?
Of course.
My understanding is that the same character limit is in Nexus that was in Megs Plus.
Correct. It is still a 300 character limit in that activity box. So all the samples that were given at the spring workshop, the sample budget details were all 300 or less characters. So we kind of hoped by doing that, you could see what we needed. If you're struggling with the 300 character limit, please let me know. There will still be a place in Nexus that you'll be able to upload additional information if we need to. So for those of you that have gone through the MICIP process for that strategy or activity, I'm not going to have too many questions for you, most likely, because I know you've gone through, the discussions, the root cause analysis, the HEX tool, or different pieces and parts. So I'll feel like you have a pretty good handle of why you want that to be in your budget, right? You've done the work. So I may just have, add this or, I know you have a need behind it. Otherwise, it wasn't going to show up in MICIP in the first place. Okay, so that's scenario number one. Scenario number two is if you've been doing something. So many of you have worked with me for almost 10 years, give or take, depending on, or at least I know all the districts I've worked with about 10 years. But if you've been doing something, and I've seen it in a previous district improvement plan, and we've discussed it before, I've seen a job description, we've had those types of things, then again, I may just have a few little questions for you, but if I remember it and everything goes well and I can see it in an old budget or something like that, again, I will, I will most likely approve it because we've talked about it in the past. I've had the detail I needed. I had the job descriptions and so on and so forth. So that's kind of scenario number two. Scenario three, though, is a little different. If there's something brand new, some program or some position that you've never had before. So I've never seen a job description. I've never seen a program description. I've never seen it in the previous budget. It did not make it into MICIP this round. Those are the ones you're going to want to do a little preliminary work with me. If you have a job description, send it to me. If you have a program description, send it to me. You're going to have to really show me, what's the need behind it. How did you get to that point? Those types of things. And then I have to check it for the things like, is it applicable to the law? Does it meet the intent and purpose of the law? Is it reasonable? The amount of money, is it necessary to meet the goals that you have? So those are kind of the three scenarios that I'll be looking at when I'm trying to approve your budgets in Nexus. So that's why I'm just asking, if you have it, send it to me early, whether it's new budget items, old budget items, spreadsheets, whatever. That way we can get all of this in. And then you can just work through what you need to work through Nexus. One of the questions I've had for private schools actually is the equitable services calculation worksheet obviously is worked into Nexus. And I know Dave does the majority of the work for you guys here, but if you did need to come up with different, numbers, like normally the numbers, the total counts or low income counts are coming from your TIS. I'm assuming Dave probably used my school data or something like that to pull the information. Is that true, Dave? Or did they pull the information for that?
Yeah, they pulled the information out of last year's counts.
They used last year's counts.
Yep.
Okay. So one of the things though that I did find out since we've had that meeting is that if you go into my school data and look at last year's counts, according to Nate, who is the one who created the spreadsheet, those counts will be the counts that are most accurate, and those will be the counts that will be pulled in to Nexus. So I don't know if you want to spend a little time adjusting that, or if you just want to wait since you've already had your preliminary meetings with private schools. But anyways, that's there.
So for the notes, if the whatever's in my school data, if they were to go and look at that now, that is the number that's going to pull into
2020. Yeah.
Yep, the 2020 my school data number.
Fall.
That's going to be what.
Yeah. Yeah. The 2020 fall count.
So in my school data, you can't select fall and spring count.
Oh, you can't?
Mm-mm.
Okay. According to Nate, he told me, because I asked him this question, he said the my school data count is the most accurate and seems to mirror most closely what ends up being in there. So
okay.
If they feel like they want to adjust, they can, or they can just wait until Nexus comes up and adjust then, because it could be slightly different than last year's information. So I know I sent out a couple emails about this, and it's been a bit confusing around the whole thing for, and maybe Dave was going to talk about this, but the Section 31A report that's due July 15th, there's been a lot of information go out about that. That will be in Nexus. It has nothing to do with the consolidated app. It's also being built in Nexus. And of course, it's also delayed. They're holding firm that that's still going to be due on July 15th. I just double checked again this morning because I had some questions from a district. Because it is a state law that it's due by July 15th. They say they will send out a communication when that report is available. Now, what they sent out and the things that then I resent out to everyone, and hopefully you all got it, were that they kind of took some screenshots of the report so that you know exactly the information. And I think that's, Dave, probably what you're going to talk about a little bit. So really what I'm encouraging you to do is once Dave talks about that is really just pull your information and get it all together. And then as soon as Nexus, the report opens, then you can get it in the system. I asked him if there was going to be any leniency because I've had people panicking because they're going on vacation and things. And I do not want anyone to panic or be upset about this. I want you to take your vacations. If you have a individual concern, I will have you contact, and they're starting to kind of regionalize who's going to be the contact for 31A now that they have multiple people. I think our contact is going to be Joan Jackson, but I'll double check on that. And if you have an individual concern about that, let me know. I will get you into contact with Joan and then we'll work with that. So then the other confusing part is that many of you also receive Section 41, the bilingual funds. That report will still be in MEGS Plus. So that's where it got a little confusing. That one is still in MEGS Plus. However, that one is also delayed because Agate's been moving to Nexus, trying to work on Nexus. They've kind of stopped working on MEGS. So that will also be a communication that goes out once the 41 report is available in MEGS Plus. They will let you know. And then you can get that done as well. And I'm not as familiar with that report, so I'm not sure if the information needs to be pulled for that. There might be something on our website for that one, but I just wanted you to know Section 41 report is in MEGS Plus. Section 31A report is in Nexus, but delayed. And of course, the consolidated app, there's been some rumors out there. The consolidated app will absolutely be in Nexus. It's just going to be late. Once we have a launch date for Nexus for consolidated app, we will let you know what the new due date is. And again, as long as you meet that new due date, you will still get a July 1st obligation date. Same thing goes though. If you have a conflict because you're going to be out for any reason, baby, surgery, vacations, whatever, please contact me. Many of you know I will work with you and we will get that obligation date. So that'll all work out. Don't worry. That's why though I want you to build your spreadsheets now. That way you have a general idea of what's going on and what's allowable, what's not, and then we can just build it when it opens. Let's see. If any of you have changes in any of your contacts, your district contacts, so the superintendent, business official, program contacts, any of that, I know I've gotten a few emails already. Please send me an email with the new person's name, email, phone number, what their role is, and so on. And that way I can update my contact list and make sure that the new people are getting the information when it comes out. I hate to miss anybody, and I still end up missing somebody. So please do that. So I have a second grandbaby coming, a little girl, actually. Her name is going to be Gia Michelle. I'm super excited. She's coming, well, supposed to be coming at the end of July. Her other grandmother will stay with them for a week, and then I will go stay with them for a week. So sometime in August, most likely, I will be taking a week off to go stay with the new baby. So I will let you all know when that happens. Also, I will be going bear hunting again. I know y'all think I'm crazy, but that's okay. But that is at the end and beginning of end of September, beginning of October. So that week I will be off as well. But again, I will let you all know when that happens. And again, hoping the Nexus is in place and ready to go well before all of that happens. But I'll keep you on top of when I'll be in or out of the office. And I am more than happy to do one-on-one Zooms at any time. Just let me know. We did get some information about returning to the office, kind of, sort of. What I haven't heard back is when they'll start letting us travel to you again. So when you guys start holding meetings again, and when I can start traveling and you need me to come to a district function, or we start doing on-site reviews again, I will let you know as soon as I can start traveling back to the districts, because that's what I miss, I think, most of all. I don't mind working from home. I just need to get back into the districts, into the ISDs. So, okay, Dave, I think those are my kind of reminders. The big one is getting stuff done early, get stuff to me early for pre-approval. And I think that'll make getting Nexus done much easier. So I'll be quiet for a while. If something comes to mind, I'll let you know.
I've been trying to take notes in the document. I might have missed this, but as when it comes to the consolidated application, I believe that I heard that we're going to have 30 business days from when the consolidated application is open in Nexus to actually complete it. Is that what you're hearing as well?
I have not heard that, honestly. I have not heard that.
Okay.
All I have heard is that once it's launched, there will be a new date established. I just don't know what that is. Okay. But that sounds reasonable, what you're talking about. I just haven't actually heard that from anyone.
Okay. So just so I'm understanding the 31A APFR. So let's say that they get Nexus up and running on July 13th. It's still going to be due the 15th.
That was what I was trying to get an answer for this morning. And they said they're going to try to be as flexible as possible, but they feel like their hands are tied because it's a state regulation. So I don't know if they're using the state regulation to try to get Agate to move to get it built in Nexus faster, or I don't know. I would have to imagine they have to be somewhat flexible. but I am not part of that team and I do not get to make those decisions. So I'm just encouraging you all to, again, have the information early, pull it all together, be ready to go. And if you have a direct concern like this, then I will send you to whoever our contact is, which I believe is Joan Jackson. And I'll let you know that, Dave, when I find out. I know they split up the counties, and I know she has some on my side. I just don't know if she has all of mine. So.
And we are going to talk about the 31A APFR in my section. So I'll
Okay.
get some more details about how to get that done in time. So.
All right. I will be quiet now. Thank you.
So what questions does everybody have for Shelley before we move on?
Shelley, I was curious in for MICIP in scenario 3, when something maybe it's scenario 2/3. Just curious, like how, like, are you going to look at just last year's budget, or are you going to look, so like right when we do our school improvement plans, they are, I don't know, 3 to 5 years.
Right.
But our budgets obviously are year to year. So I was just talking with someone last night. There's something we want to do around formative assessment. I don't know. I haven't looked. I can't remember if it was in our plan in our budget last year, but I know that it's been in our plan previously. So I guess just kind of.
If it's been in your plan previously, but you didn't have it in your budget, you probably better give me the heads up, because then I know to go look in a previous plan, because I still have access to assist. So I can still go back and look at like last year's plan. I can definitely go back and look at the last couple of years' budgets. But if you had it in your plan, but you never budgeted it, to me, that's brand new in my mind.
Okay.
You would have to give me a quick heads up through an email or through a note in Megs, look at me, a note in Nexus, that it's, was in last year's dip or something like that. So then I can go take a look and give me a general idea of where it's at, so I don't have to search the whole thing. But yeah, those are the types of things I'll need the heads up for, because it's going to be confusing. I'm going to have multiple places I'm going to have to search for things.
So basically, if it wasn't in literally last year's budget, that we need to give you a heads up on it.
Probably, yeah. If it doesn't directly pull from MICIP already, and it wasn't in last year's budget, you probably better give me a heads up. Yeah. Okay. Oh, I did think of one more thing. I'm interrupting, I realize, but if you didn't, or you might want to go back to the spring workshop and relook at that budget section again. They're asking us to be a bit more picky on Title II and the professional development that we are approving. We're not supposed to approve so much small little one-timey type things. It's supposed to really be systematic, across the board PD, larger items. For those of you that have a bit more Title II money, we might be able to do some, smaller type things because we need to. But in general, when you're thinking about spending your Title II money, think about it from a system-wide perspective, sustainability, big time PDs, rather than just the one here, 2 teachers here, 1 teacher there, this one, this, occasionally there are some PDs like that, but just think bigger. So you might want to go back and relook at that section again. Okay, so Allison, I probably interrupted you.
Well, I just had a follow-up to so if something's new, what, I know you might have said it, and I'm sorry if I blanked out for a minute, but what kind of information do you want from us to go along with the cost piece?
So if something's brand new, if it's a position, like say you've never had a counselor before or something like that, I'd want to see the position description or job description, right? I want to see that. And if you can send that to me early, that'd be awesome. If it's a new program that you want to run a new program, then I would want to see some kind of program description written, and in both of those, you're going to need to tell me what the need was. What was the need behind that? And, and how is it applicable to the law, which means how does it meet the intent and purpose of the Title I law or the Title II law, or so on and so forth. I'm going to try to make myself a little cheat sheet of the questions. And once I make myself the cheat sheet, I think what I'll do is send it out to all of you. So, these are the things I'm looking at when I'm approving your budget items. But it's really, what's the need? Is it applicable to the law? Is it reasonable? Is it necessary? Those are the big things that I have to look for in Title II, like I was just talking about, the big self-sustaining pieces. That's what I'm going to be looking for. So, but yes, you can send all that stuff to me early. You don't have to wait till Nexus opens up to do that. But you can, but then you run the risk of me saying, no, that's not allowable. But
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Boy, all of this must be super clear, Shelley, because nobody has any questions except for Allison. Good question, Allison. So for some of our folks that maybe have not been through this process before, we do have a couple people in the call that's the case for. Just know that you guys can always reach out to me, and Shelley is really, really good about getting back to you. So if this sounds a little daunting and that sort of thing, you're in good company because nobody here has done Nexus before. So I really don't think there's anything to be like overly concerned about. So we'll kind of take it one step at a time, and we'll see how things go. And like Shelley said, when once Nexus does come out, we can for sure do a real technical assistance type day where we can all come in and kind of work through things on a screen by screen basis and all that kind of thing. So, all right, if there aren't any further questions for Shelley, I do have a bit of content that I'd like to go over with everybody. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and the presentation is linked right in here. The presentation is mostly there to link out to a bunch of other resources. I did copy some of those into the actual agenda itself. So I have three things that I want to talk about today, and the first two, the 31A update and the time and effort, has really kind of been born out of lots of questions that I've gotten from everybody here. And then I also help out in Ottawa a little bit. And so some of these questions kind of came from in Ottawa as well. But for 31A specifically, I do want to touch just a little bit on the at-risk identification and the at-risk services. And I won't go too much in depth on that. I've had technical assistance days to be able to do that. I've worked with a lot of districts individually, so I promise not to belabor those two things, but I do want to go a little bit into that to build a little background knowledge on that. In working with districts on their program fiscal reports this year, I've had a couple of allowable use concerns come up in those conversations. And so I'm going to work through a specific scenario. And when you see that scenario, some districts are going to be like, oh my gosh, he's using my scenario. It came up so many times that I had to use that specific scenario. So if you look at it and you're like, he's talking about me, not really. I'm talking about a scenario that I saw that came up many, many times just this year. So I'm going to kind of talk through that scenario a little bit. And then just wanted to get into some world according to Dave stuff when it comes to the budget. So anyway, about the at-risk identification, there's two things that we use our Power School for here. One is to identify the students that are at risk, and the other one is to identify the programs that they received. And so there's still quite a bit of confusion every year at this time. People will be like, well, I've been identifying my kids all year. It's like, that's good, but did we identify all the services that they got? Because you're going to need that information to do your annual fiscal program report, the APFR. So just kind of keep in your mind, there's two things that we have to report on in our Power School for 31A. The first one is this at-risk identification, and this is where we're identifying the kids that are at risk. Power School does a ton of the work for us on this. It pulls all the other about, I want to say 11 categories by itself. And then there are 5 things that we have to identify and make sure are correct at each count period. And I didn't type them in there, but those are that the kids are at risk with reading and math on our local benchmark assessments, a victim of child abuse or neglect, that they had a family history of school failure or incarceration, that they're a pregnant teen or a teen parent, not that their parents were teens. I still get lots and lots of kindergartners that are marked as being a pregnant teen or teen parent. Okay, this is not about their parents, it's about them. And then the final category that we can mark is that the student basically is doing 12th grade again, right? They didn't pass 12th grade, they're continuing. So they didn't graduate and they're continuing. So those are the fields that we can mark, and we really need to check those at each of the count periods. The reason I say each of the count periods is because if the kids have to be marked for 2 of the count periods to get marked as at risk in MSDS with MDE. And so everybody kind of thinks that we have 2 count periods, but we do have 3. We have the October count, the February count, and then the end of year count, which all of your people accounting people are feverishly working on right now. So that end of year count is due on June 30th. So if the kids are marked for 2 of those, then they'll be marked with the MDE. So there's like those 15 or so ways that the kids can get marked. So in addition to those 5 that I just said, there's things like that they were eligible for free or reduced lunch, that they were chronically absent, they failed a certain portion of the state assessment. So there's lots of ways that the kids can be marked as at risk. And the state doesn't care how they were marked. So we mark all those in PowerSchool. And then there's just one checkbox that gets checked in MSDS. And so it marks the students as 30/60. And so the state doesn't care that they were marked because they were truant. The state doesn't care that they were marked because they were a pregnant teen. It doesn't matter to the state. They just want to know if they're at risk. And on the state's side of things, so this is kind of the why does it matter category. On the state side of things, this is an accountability measure. And they will use that at-risk designation to measure that portion of it. And you can actually go to My School Data. There's a 31A report, and it's another accountability measure for us. There's certain benchmarks that districts are supposed to be hitting with their at-risk students, and it really comes down to the state assessment and how they're scoring at 3rd grade, 8th grade, and 11th grade. And there hasn't really been a lot of accountability around this so far because since that has been enacted, there's been a lot of interruption to our state assessment. So on the state side, that is why we're identifying kids as at risk. But more importantly, the reason that we're marking kids as at risk is for our own purposes. So if you've been around for a while, then you may remember when we didn't even have to report this to the state. And the reason that we collected all this information was so that we could make good decisions about how to use our 31A funds, and then to make sure that the right kids were actually getting serviced. And I really want to remind everybody of that purpose. This turned into a compliance exercise when we had to provide it to the state. And that's not what the original intent was. The original intent was to say, okay, where are our kids? Where are they at risk? What kind of problems are they having? And then to make sure that we aligned the services with the things that they needed. And I get a little soapboxy about 31A, so bear with me. I apologize in advance. But 31A often becomes kind of this dumping ground of expenditures because it's not really closely monitored, right? We don't apply for the funds. Somebody like Shelley doesn't go through our budget and look really closely at the funds. And then the program report that we have to do at the end is a joke. So it really is easy and understandable for districts to kind of start to use it as a piggy bank and to say, well, we can just put this in at risk. We can put this in at risk. And if you think of when we're identifying the kids and how we're identifying them, that is what should be the driver of how we're spending our 31A funds. So what do the kids need? And so we have a lot of data that we collect through PowerSchool to say, this is what these are the kids, and here's where their problems are. And that's the reason that that program initially existed. It turned into a compliance exercise and we had to report it to the state. So that's just kind of something to think about when we're doing all that at-risk reporting. When I talk to people about it, I try to say, okay, so how can we look at this data? How can we use this data when we're assessing our needs, when we're thinking about how to spend our funds, when we're making a budget for 31A? what does this tell us about how we're supposed to do that? So that's at risk identification. I'm going to pause there. Shelley, anything that you'd like to add or any questions anybody has just on
Yeah,
the risk identification
every
side?
time, every time I have an on-site review, there's misuse of 31A funds. And I think it's for the reason David's talking about. You don't have me breathing down your neck about what you can and can't do. What I would really suggest you do is, I know you all want to do the right thing for kids. And if you can work this into your MICIP process, the continuous improvement process, and thinking about how are we using this 31A money, creating spreadsheets just like you do for title. And if you have questions about if it's allowable or not, let me know and I can hook you up again with the Section 31A team, or David or I can help you with the basics. We want you to do it right. And we don't want you to get a finding. We don't want the funding to be taken away. We don't want any of that. We want you to use the funding. Even that, as much as people sometimes tell me, oh my gosh, we don't have enough money, then I find out they're not spending their 31A money at all. And then at the very end, they're like, oh, what can I throw in this pot? So just please really think of 31A as almost like another title funding. It's best practice just to follow all the same ideas, rules, and regulation. It has its own law, of course, but I would just think of it in the same manner as you do title. And then if you have questions along the way, please just ask us. We'll help you in any way.
Thanks for stealing my thunder later, Shelley.
Oh, well, you can say it again.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about the second kind of reporting that we do for 31A then. And that is the services that we actually provided to the students. And we report that in the annual program fiscal report, fondly known as the APFR. So when we made a tracking system here at the ISD in our Power School. So we're very, very fortunate, and Jeff did an awesome job of making that. And lots of people around the state are now kind of emulating that. But we track all of that in Power School. And I usually recommend that at each count period, when we're already updating our 31A identification, why not just get with all the people that are servicing your 31A students or your at-risk students and putting those services in at each of the count periods. That way, when you get to the end of the year, it's just done. What typically happens though is that we get to the end of the year and all the teachers have left, the counselors have left, and a lot of districts haven't collected the student lists of the kids that those people worked with. And so then like I've literally sat with people as they're entering this in, and they're on the phone with the social worker that was funded out of 31A that's sitting on the beach. And she's like, well, I think I worked with Steve and Susie. And so like, just try to like build this into your process. When you have to report on your identification, just report on the services as well. This data does not go to the state at all. So it's put into our Power School for us to track this for our ease of completing the APFR. And so that's the only reason that this stuff gets put in. So this doesn't get reported to the state. So I just wanted to show you very quickly where you can get that. So I'm just gonna log in as North Muskegon. And John, I saw a thumbs up from John, not that he had much choice, I was already logged in. So basically when you get into Power School, if you just come over to system reports, and it's under local reports, 31A reporting. And the reports that you need are right here where it says reports. So you click on instructional programs and it will give you the numbers, all the numbers you need to put in on the program side. So it'll tell you what grades might you have served, what were the total number of at-risk students served, and then if they are eligible for free or reduced lunch. So you need to put all of that information in for the instructional programs, the non-instructional and other services, and then a compiled report will say what was the total amount of students that were served, how many of them were free or reduced lunch. So that's what you can provide, but you still need to work with your business office to say how much was spent in each of those categories. So it's not hard to complete this report. It's just mainly you want to get the data into Power School so that it'll pull the report for you, puts it in a really nice format that matches exactly what it looks like in the APFR. Anybody that has completed the APFR that would like to add anything, any words of wisdom, places that you get hung up, things that are easy about it, things that are hard about it? I'd really like, is there anybody that can share just a little bit about that?
I can. Karen, I everything you said is right on, right? It doesn't matter how you just have, I plug it in my calendar. I need to get it in before they leave for the summer. And no matter how many reminders I have in my calendar and I remind them, they still forget. So you really just have to be on them, sending them multiple emails and checking, right? Then it makes it easy.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think no matter how much you try to stay on top of it, there's going to be a little bit of cleanup that you have to do right as you're getting ready to submit the report. You'll have like errant students identified for something where you're like, this, we'd never funded a school health clinic or something like that, or whatever. So it's there'll be things that you need to kind of clean up and that sort of thing. But just know that the data that you're putting into PowerSchool is for your use, so you can complete the report. I wanted to show everybody on the 31A webpage. They have, and I linked out to the PowerPoints for these in our agenda. They have held some webinars this year. One that really went into great detail on the program fiscal report. That was kind of what I said for newbies. So they really went into a lot of detail. There's the recorded webinar. There's the PowerPoint for it. The PowerPoint is copied in our agenda. Then they had like a more quick review for people that have done it before, like, are there new things? What looks different about it? And then there's a section in there that talks about, because the districts are required to basically sign off to say that they have an MTSS process in order to receive 31A funds, that there's a section in there you have to describe what is your MTSS process, what kind of assistance have you had on it, what kind of professional learning have you had around it. And apparently people were not giving good answers to that. And so they provided some additional professional learning about that. I don't know that they're going to be sending them back if you don't do a good job in that section. But if you want to make sure that your report goes through, you might want to take a look at that PowerPoint on the MTSS responses section, because they called that out specifically, and they gave a lot of examples and non-examples in the webinars. So I recommend taking a look at that. They do have some upcoming technical assistance office hours. So that's going to be important for this next piece. But I just wanted to point out, right on a 31A webpage, if you don't know what it is, just type into your Google search MDE 31A and you'll go right to this webpage. They have all these technical assistance hours that you can go to and get help. And so there's going to be a time that I think some of you might want to take advantage of that. I'll explain here and back in the presentation. So that kind of leads into this allowable use piece. And again, as I'm working with districts, I have seen a lot of things this year that aren't allowable or are questionable and that sort of thing. And so it's a little complicated with 31A because it's different than some of the other grants. This is a categorical fund. And as such, it's supposed to be treated as supplemental. So why is that a little confusing? Well, categorical, you can spend some things on categorical funds that you can just literally just spend the money on it. So for example, in 31A, you can spend money if you have a certain amount of free and reduced lunch students, you can spend money on security. That could literally be the only money that you spend on security, right? So it's okay, you can spend that money on security. You have to spend some of the money on your school breakfast. So it's categorically set aside for those purposes. However, a lot of the other ways that we spend the money, and this is where it gets confusing and why I understand why people get confused about it, the money is still supplemental when we talk about the other ways that you spend it. And so this goes back to Shelley's cake analogy that I always use. And when you're spending things that are supplemental, you can't spend it on the cake. So you can't, that can't be the first dollars, right? You have to think about it as above and beyond dollars, or what additional things are you doing dollars? And so I have some examples next that kind of get into that. But 31A, it can be confusing because it's a categorical, and there are certain things in there that you can just flat out spend the money on. But really, it's the funds are meant to be supplemental when we're talking about a lot of those allowable expenses.
Yeah. So can I say something real quick here before you move on? So one of the confusing parts here was that a few years ago, the 31A legislation kind of got a little loose for a minute. And when it got loose, people started paying for all kinds of crazy stuff because they were told, and some people were told that it wasn't supplemental, and that was incorrect. And they fixed it pretty quickly. But what I've found is that when I've been going into districts around my 3 counties, is that districts are paying for teachers of record, like full teachers of record, like first grade teachers, second grade, whatever. And it wasn't class size reduction. It wasn't anything else like that. It was just flat out, oh, we can use 31A for anything we need. So if you got into that rut, that 1 or 2 years, if that was kind of loose, we need to find a way to help you get out of that rut. So thanks.
Yes, so I refer to that time as the Wild West of 31A. And so we've kind of been digging out of it ever since. So that's a little bit why we're talking about it today. Okay, so example situation. Again, I promise this is not about any one district. This came up many times this year, and it's something that I've actually had to work with several districts on in previous years as well. And sometimes after they had on-site reviews, and this became a finding. So the situation is counselors. So I made up this specific scenario here, but the situation about counselors is prevalent right now. So in our imaginary districts, there's 4 high school counselors, and they're all split funded, 25% 31A and 75% general fund. But the counselors are all doing typical duties that a counselor would normally do. They're writing EDPs, they're meeting with kids. Sometimes it's for a crisis, sometimes it's just to talk through counseling things. They're doing their college applications, they're building the course schedules, all the stuff that counselors do. They just have their one regular job description. They're not doing any time or effort. And then they go in and they're like, well, our counselors are funded our 31A, so we're going to mark all of our high school kids as receiving this service for the annual program fiscal report. But in this case, I hope that you can see that that's all cake, right? There are no toppings. It's just all cake. This is a thing that any counselor would do. They have counselor 1 is A through, I don't know, F, and counselor 2 is G through L. Counselor 3 is M through T, right? Counselor 4 is V through Z, whatever. It's all cake. You can't use 31A in this regard. And so I see this with counselors. I see it with social workers. I see that sometimes we actually partially fund teachers. And when you talk to people about it, they say, well, they work with at-risk kids. We all work with at-risk kids, right? You can't, but this is the normal duty. This is the normal thing that these counselors would do, or those social workers would do, or those teachers would do.
Can I interject there?
Please.
So there was a time that Oak Ridge, I'll just use Oak Ridge as an example. There was a time that we only had 1 high school counselor. We utilized at-risk funds to add additional services.
Absolutely. And that's totally allowable. And that's what I'm going to talk about on the next slide.
All right. You're welcome.
Tom, that was an awesome lead in. Thank you so much. So there's a couple of scenarios, right? The first one, in this case, we had 4 counselors, right? So if you really had a need that you needed some sort of additional above and beyond services, you could take that quarter of a person that we had paying for 31A out of each of those. You could fund one of those people 100% out of 31A, and you could completely write a new job description that talks about the work that they're going to be doing with at-risk students. So the students would be assigned to the other counselors for their regular counseling stuff. Those other counselors would do their EDPs with them. They do help them with their college applications, all that kind of stuff. But that at-risk counselor would have separate job duties that match the intent and purpose of the law, right? They could work with them on crisis counseling. They could do small groups around MTSS, social emotional learning. They could do above and beyond work of getting connected with college and career readiness. There's all kinds of things that they could do with them, but it would have to be supplemental. The kids would have to be assigned to the other counselor for all the normal counselor stuff. This counselor could go above and beyond and really target those students that are most at risk using the 31A identification sheets to really target and identify who are these kids, how are they at risk, and what can we do to mitigate those risks and make sure that they're successful. So that would be one scenario. The other scenario might be like Tom's scenario, where you partially fund somebody out of that, but they have two completely different job descriptions. And one of the job descriptions is to do their normal work, where they're working with the kids, making the schedules, all those sorts of things. And then for a portion of their day, they are performing other duties, and they're working specifically with a caseload of kids and with allowable expenses. And they have two different job descriptions, and they're just going to have to do time and effort under those circumstances for us to understand how that is. And there's a couple of different ways that we can track that I'll talk about here in a second. But the bottom line here is to say that yes, it may be allowable to do those things, but you need to do it right and make sure that we're being targeted about the services that the kids are getting, that we're using those identification sheets to identify the kids that need the help, that we have different job descriptions so that the counselors understand that they have two different roles, that they have a general funded role, that they have at-risk role, in this case, counselors, but whatever the situation is. So I'm going to just pause there to see if there's any other thoughts that anybody has, any questions about that. And again, I'm not using any one district for this. This is something that's been pretty prevalent around our county.
So what I want to say is there's two different things to consider here. One's the identification, and we can identify a lot of kids as at risk for all those multiple reasons that you were talking about. And that is for accountability purposes. And we want that number to be high, to be honest. You want that number to be high, and I get that. But you got to think a whole different way when you're thinking about how to spend the money and who to serve. Just because 85% of your kids fell on that at-risk list doesn't mean that you can just randomly, pay for 85% of some service because 85% of your kids are at risk. You have to think about it a whole different way. So identification is one thing, serving kids is a totally different thing. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about 31A.
Any other questions or thoughts about like the scenario, the cake item, the toppings stuff? I know that it's kind of, we've talked about the cake and the toppings quite a bit, but it is something that comes up really regularly, and it becomes hard to fill out the program fiscal report because people are spending money in ways that aren't on the list, or or it comes up that we're funding positions that don't have different job descriptions and aren't serving at-risk students. Okay, so how to get on top of this and stay on top. So like Shelley stole from me earlier, my main suggestion is to treat 31A like it's Title I. And Shelley can attest to this. This is the way that I did it in my budget. So I maintained a budget spreadsheet that looked just like the consolidated app for 31A. I got pre-approval for all of my 31A expenditures, and I actually uploaded my budget spreadsheet as additional budget detail into MEGS. And I asked for and got approval on my 31A plan at initial amendments and at my initial consolidated application submission and at amendment time. In doing so, I was able to try to mitigate some of that tendency to say, well, we're not sure how else to spend this. Let's put it in at risk because we obligated those funds ahead of time, and we knew where those dollars were going, how they were going to be spent. So that's kind of the main recommendation, is just treat it like it's Title I and get approval. And they have those technical assistance days set up that I showed you on the 31A page. Why not just put your budget together and go and sit down with the 31A team and say, here's how we're planning to spend our budget. What do you think about this? Do you have any concerns with the way that we're doing it? They might say, well, do you have job descriptions? Are you doing time and effort? And you can kind of talk through all those different things. But like a lot of things, if you're proactive about it and work with people ahead of time, then you can head off a lot of problems. I would really recommend trying to use those targeted tech or those technical assistance days that they have available and make a plan, make a budget. I put a example of a 31A planning template in here. And if you use this, it will also help with your program fiscal report, because the categories and then the subcategories that are listed here are the only ways that you can spend 31A. So if you try to put something in here and you're like, well, I don't know, I don't really see it on this list. Well, you can't spend 31A though any that way, right? So if you can come in here and say what category and what subcategory it's in, the amount that it is, you can put in your school-wide reform dollars if you are a school that does, or a district that does that. You can put in your breakfast, your allocation, any carryover that you have, and it will just really kind of budget it out for you. You can go over that budget with the 31A team. You can upload it as additional budget detail if you'd like, but I really recommend getting on top of it and staying on top of it. And like I said, treating it like it's Title I, and it will really, it'll make sure that you're using it in a targeted way. It will kind of be able to hold off some of the tendency to just use 31A funds to backfill other areas. And it'll make your reporting easier, and it'll make any kind of on-site reviews that you might get from Shelley or from the 31A team a lot easier for you. So that's all I have for 31A. I do want to talk a little, I've mentioned time and effort, so I want to kind of explain what my current state is with that. But before I do, any final questions about 31A, how to report, how to do it in PowerSchool, anything about the program fiscal report. I did put a link to screenshots of all of the program pages are here. So you can see what the actual page is going to look like in Nexus. And you'll see that it looks just exactly like the reports that you can pull out of PowerSchool. So there's just a one-to-one correspondence. They just go straight across. So that's linked here under screenshot of program pages. Okay, if there are no questions about 31A, I want to talk about time and effort for a few minutes. This is not just specific to 31A, this is about all of our programs. I did get definitive answer from MDE that there's no time and effort associated with ESSER funds. So if you're using ESSER to fund somebody, to partially fund somebody, you don't have to do time and effort. So no PARs, no semi-annual certifications, none of that kind of stuff. So round of applause for that. So I have in here what I know about semi-annual certifications, this new kind of scenario that is called fixed schedule certification, and everybody's favorite, PARs. So I'm just going to talk about each one of those briefly, and just know that all of the stuff that I'm talking about in here, there's examples linked in the agenda. So semi-annual certifications is kind of what it's always been. We've always said at your semester time or at the middle of the year, and then at the end of the year, make sure you're doing the semi-annual certifications. We've been through and seen some presentations from national presenters. If you've ever been to MAISFPS, and Brustine Manasevitz is presenting there, they say that you really only need annual certifications. So I have found that single point auditors still ask for semi-annual certifications. It's not hard to do these certifications, so it never bothers me to do them semi-annually. But really the main thing to think about here is this person really just funded under one source? If they are, do they know that they're funded under that source? And are they only doing work associated with that funding source? That's what you're trying to establish when you do these semi-annual or annual certifications. And so basically they're signing off and saying, yes, I understand that I'm funded under Title I, I'm only performing Title I duties. And then they sign off on it and their supervisor signs off on it. When I talk to people about this, I say the reason is that you have the supervisor sign off on it is you don't want the supervisor asking them to do things that are outside of their normal duties. So I personally like having the principals sign these, not a central office staff. That's not a hard and fast rule. But if the principal understands where and how these people are funded and knows that, oh, you know what, I can't be asking them to sub every day, or I can't say, well, hey, can you just do bus duty every day for me? You know, those sorts of things, because they're not funded to do those sorts of things. So that's what the semi-annual certifications are for. Allison, you were asked to provide, yeah. Allison, did they ask to do semi-annual, or did they say that it was okay to do annual, or did they not specify?
That part I can't remember. I think we landed on first semester, second semester, but I can't remember if that's because what we had, just because what we had done, or if that was what they asked for. That part I can't remember. I was just told by my business office that I had to get them.
Yep.
So
yeah. Oh yeah. This is something that is of great concern for any kind of audit that you're getting. A program audit, a fiscal audit. People are going to be all over this stuff. So you will for sure be asked for this. Holton just had to go through a desk audit. And that's actually where we learned about this next one, this fixed schedule certification. So
a question that I had for that though, just because we
sure.
were on it, like, because I wasn't sure, and I can't remember now if I think the auditors didn't ask for every single one. I think they picked people.
Yes.
But do we need to have those for like my people that work at Calvary?
So I'll maybe let Shelley weigh in on that. My first thought is no, but because you're hiring for a specific purpose, but I'll see what Shelley says.
I would say just to do it to be on the safe side, because you are using federal funds to hire them. Yes, I understand it's for a very specific reason, private school services, but at least then you have their timesheets, and then you have those semi-certs to say, hey, all I'm doing for this funding is this. Then you're covered. That's all. And again, it's not that hard to get them to sign something or have somebody sign something, twice a year saying that's all they do.
Okay, I just wasn't sure because
I would just be on the safe side. That's all.
Okay. Yep.
So another scenario, and this came up during Holton's bench review or desk review, they call them, where they basically, this is from the fiscal, this was a fiscal review. And they said that you can do fixed schedule certifications. And so this is for somebody that is split funded, but their schedule remains the same. So the example that I have here is in the morning, somebody is scheduled to provide interventions to students and they're paid for out of 31A, but in the afternoon, they do some coaching with the staff, and that's the way it is all the time. They have a schedule in the morning where they work with the kids. They have the schedule in the afternoon where they work with the staff, and they stick to that schedule. They work with kids, they eat lunch, and they work with adults. You just need two job descriptions. You need to have a calendar that shows that that's what they do. And then they just sign a certification that's essentially attests to the same thing that was in the semi-annual certifications. There are quite a few people that are in this situation, and I think it really helps to save people a ton of time on PARs and things like that if they have this this scenario.
So when we come though for a program review, we would want to see specific activities that they were doing during that morning time or that afternoon time, because then we're going to check to make sure it's allowable. Because I see what they're saying here. You have two different complete duties, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, certain funding sources, and I get all that. But there's still somewhere, and maybe it's in their schedule, maybe it's, but with coaching, you don't necessarily have a set schedule. I mean, I understand it's afternoon as you're coaching, but we need to make sure that you're actually coaching during that time. So we can't have weeks at a time where it's like, oh, nobody needs coaching, so we're just going to do blah, 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 but we're going to still pay you out of Title II. So keep that in mind as well. And I don't want you to but the other thing is the kind of information I'm asking for also helps you when it comes to evaluating your programs. Is the coaching model that you've set up working? Is it proactive instead of reactive? Is it like for coaching? One of the things that we find when we go in, I'm very excited when I see coaching in a budget, but then when I actually go visit, what I'm finding out was when I talk to the staff, the staff's like, well, I didn't even know we had a coach. Or they'll say, well, if I need help, I can ask them, or that's not very proactive, right? So we would need to see like the model and things like that. So just keep those things in mind. It's one thing to just sign off and say, yep, all they do in the morning is this, and all they do in the afternoon this, and here's their schedule. But are they really doing that? That's what we're finding, is that they're not. There's been multiple times where I've approved job descriptions. Job descriptions look great, but when I actually go there, that's not what they're doing at all. And they're being paid for something that's not in the law. So just be careful is all I'm saying.
Shelley or Dave, can you help me with something that I keep getting confused, and I probably still will, but maybe you can try again. The difference between semi-annual cert, time and effort, and PAR. Especially for people that are in the same job all day, I don't know if they're the same thing or if those are different things. And then when Shelley comes out finally out of her cave of her house to do an audit here in Fruitport, I want to make sure that I have the right things for the right people. But I get those confused.
Yeah.
So I'm just about to get into PARs.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and
Dave
time and
and I
effort is the overall
overarching
concept that that in some way, shape, or form, we need to account for the time that these people are spending in these areas. And like Shelley was just explaining, the things that they're doing during those times. That's the effort portion of it.
So if I have one person and she is a reading interventionist, and she is Title I all day, or Title I is the only fund she comes from, is the semi-annual cert enough, or do I have to have something? Do I have to have her do something different?
It is from a time and effort standpoint. Yes,
Dave and I
certification's
don't.
enough.
Yeah. Dave and I don't see eye to eye on this all the time. We have
So
I like
from,
Dave's answer.
from a time and effort standpoint, she has
Yeah.
one funding source, right?
Yeah.
So she would do a semi-annual certification. From a program monitoring and evaluation standpoint, this is why Shelley shook her head. Just signing off on the semi-annual certification saying that she's Title I and she's fine isn't going to be enough. You're going to need to know, what's she doing? When does she work with kids? Who are the kids that she worked with? What's the entry and exit criteria?
So you might have like a daily schedule, right? That I can see that, first hour she's with so-and-so working in English. And so, and then she's got even more data behind that. What kids is she working on with what programs? And so it kind of layers itself, and it goes from time and effort, the simplest piece, like you said, a semi-annual, to then digging deeper to get down to your evaluation of the program of whether or not it's working. But somebody like you're talking about, yes, time and effort, semi-annual cert, that's technically time and effort for them. But if I come for a program, I need to see that person's schedule. I need to see who they're working with. I need to see all those things, and we'll dig deeper, like he's talking about. What was the exit and entrance criteria for those kids? What programs are you using? What's the data say? Is it working? That kind of stuff.
But like turned into the office, I need the semi-annual cert, but I can tell the reading interventions, let's just say, you have to keep this, but they don't necessarily have to like turn that into me, each year.
But you would have to be able to get a hold of it if I
Yeah.
or the federal government ever asked for it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
So the reason that Shelley and you get a lot of like the nodding, but then the shaking of the head of the other person is the, I'm trying to simplify this to talk about time and effort. I'm not trying to mix this with program evaluation at this time, right?
All right. I'll be
But
fine.
keep in mind, there's other documentation that you need for program evaluation. I'm going to talk about that with MICIP a little bit too.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. This is specifically from a time and effort standpoint. So the last one, as Allison was asking about, is this personnel action reports, right? So in our first two scenarios, somebody had one funding source, they work at it all day. Second scenario, they had maybe two of them. There was a specific schedule. In the morning, they were doing one thing. In the afternoon, they were doing another thing. So with PARs, now you're in a situation where somebody has multiple funding sources again, 2, 3. I've seen people with 5 funding sources. Okay. So they have multiple funding sources, but they don't have a fixed schedule, right? So it's like, well, sometimes I'm doing this, but some other time I'm doing this. And a lot of times we might end up in those scenarios, to say, well, we're 10% funded out of this or 5% funded out of that. But it doesn't come at a specific time. And so if that's the case, then that's what PARs are for. It's to look at your schedule to help you determine how much time did you actually spend on this. And so when you maintain those, you keep them weekly, but you look at them monthly. And if you're a little bit off, it's okay. What you're looking for though is, are you consistently off? And if you're consistently off, then you either need to change what the funding is for that person. So let's say that somebody's supposed to be 50-50, but they're coming out 25-75% over and over and over. Well, then you should either change their funding source to be 25-75, or you should look at their job duties and reassign their job duties so they end up being 50-50. So it's not like a hand slap or anything like that, but you are supposed to look at this monthly, and the business office is supposed to make adjustments if you're seeing consistently that you're off on this. So that is why you maintain PARs, and it's kind of a pain. There's no two ways about it. It takes time to go back and look at calendars and fill things out. And but I've seen people that do a really nice job of maintaining their calendar, you know, like color coding their calendar and things like that. It makes it a little bit easier to print out. There's lots of ways to keep these. I put one example here that's kind of electronic version. People do paper versions. I've seen people do Google Sheet versions. I've seen people print their Google Calendar that was color coded and put the calculation of time at the top of it. I've seen people do lots and lots of things on this. So there's not one specific way or to do it. But I do have a template linked in the presentation and linked in the agenda that I can help you customize for that specific person around how many funding sources they have, what are their duties, and things like that.
Okay, I'm going to be annoying with another question. Sorry. So I know you keep it monthly, and this is probably more of a fiscal question, but so we're working on, we have social workers and we have them split funded. IDEA or whatever, our special ed funding, general fund, at risk are the main funding sources. So we keep our PAR, but what if there's fluctuation? So like, what if, you know, September their work with gen ed kids and special ed kids, is this the same thing? Maybe this is not the right way or place to ask this question, but let's say in October, they're 80-20, 80 special ed kids, 20% gen ed kids. But then maybe in the next month, it's 60-40. And then the next, you know, what if it, so at the end, when we have to like report, do we just average the months? Is that how you do that is that how you do that?
Well, in title, I mean, that's what it comes down to, right? I ask you to look at it on a regular basis. That way, if you need to make an adjustment, you can make an adjustment at amendment time, right? If that's a 25-75 or 80-20 or whatever you're doing. But for title anyways, at the end of the year, when you're drawing down funds, you're fine as long as it averaged out, right? But you do have to stay on top of it if you've got someone like that it's fluctuating. Because you'll really have one opportunity at amendment time to make that adjustment if you need to. And if you've gone way over, you can't just draw down way over the amount of money, because that's what they ended up doing, because I only approved a certain amount. So that's where you could get stuck in the end and be like, oh, they really used way more title money, but I can't allow you, you have a 10% leeway. You could do 10%, that's it. So Dave, I don't know if you have something else there.
No, it's really to kind of try to stay on top of it and just to make sure that it's coming out. And it's always okay to spend more out of the general fund. So,
not if you're in my chair, just for the record. But so you have to keep it monthly, but then at the end, when you're, actually drawing down the funds or whatever, or assigning a certain percentage to a certain fund, it is okay to average the months. Did I hear that right? Or
yep.
Okay.
Yep. And it's just one of those things where if you're looking at it month over month over month, they're only spending 25%, 25%, 25%. That's when you're like, well, are you really going to start spending 100% of your time on this? Or does this look like it's what the norm is and we need to do an amendment? Thank you for the questions, Allison. I'm glad you're asking them. Okay. If there's nothing else on that, I just have a few quick things on MICIP. And then we'll be done with our full group part of the day. So I've been getting some questions about this as far as do we need to do a comprehensive needs assessment? Do we need to do a program evaluation? And so we do not need to do a separate comprehensive needs assessment. So in MICIP, if you are completing the whole process, if you are doing the assessed needs, if you are doing the data analysis, the root cause analysis, all that kind of stuff, that's taking the place of the comprehensive needs assessment. So you do not need to maintain a separate comprehensive needs assessment. Program evaluation, this is kind of goes back to our earlier conversation that Shelley and I were just having. You don't have to do a program evaluation tool. So there is no PET. You don't fill out a PET. You don't upload a PET. You don't have to fill out a PET. However, when Shelley comes in to do an on-site review, she's going to say, how are you evaluating your programs? And if you say, well, I do MICIP, that will not be the right answer. So you need to really show how you're continually evaluating the ways that you're spending your state and federal programs on an annual basis. And so that's all over the district and school study guides for on-site review. How are you evaluating Title I? How are you evaluating Title II? How are you evaluating Title III? How are you evaluating Title IV? It's all over it. And so you can't just say, well, we did MICIP, and so that was our program evaluation. I am currently working on a tracking system with Kathy and Jenny at Muskegon. They have a really nice system that they're doing. And I think once we kind of finalize that, we might want to bring that out to show this is one way that you can track and show that you're evaluating all of your programs. But you don't have to upload that. That's really kind of a separate thing. The bottom line is you don't have to do a PET, but just know that MICIP doesn't count as program evaluation for our on-site review purposes. So Jenny or Kathy, do you guys have anything that you might want to add about that?
Dave, you always do a good job of giving the overview, but I think it's helpful for us to keep track because we do have so many programs and services that we use with our title monies. And then this way we can ensure every so many years that we are evaluating those different funding sources to make sure they're having a positive impact.
And I really like what they're developing. It's not quite ready for prime time, but once it is, I'm excited to share it. I don't know how excited they are, but
Very
especially
exciting,
Kathy.
Dave.
Kathy's the one that's
Anything
entering
with
it all.
you is exciting.
Kathy,
And-
what would you have to add?
Honestly, Jenny is always really good at summing it up, so I'll just leave it with her.
Okay. Sorry, Shelley, did you have something that you wanted to add?
I'm sorry. The idea too is that eventually as MICIP gets developed out even further and more goals and time has passed in MICIP, that the evaluation piece will be built in there. That was the whole goal behind it. This year, they felt like they couldn't really build in an evaluation piece at this point because you're just getting your first set of your first goal in the system. So that is the idea. I hope it works out. That way, it just kind of flows through the process as everything else does. We'll see how that works.
So that kind of falls in the category of there aren't separate processes for that anymore, but we do still have to do the Title I program plan. So before that was an assist, it was a diagnostic, and there was either the school-wide plan or the targeted assistance plan. Now there's just one plan, but we do have to complete those, one for each of your Title I schools. So you can't just do like a district-wide Title I plan. They are supposed to be completed for each of your schools. There's a memo that goes into how that is done, and there's the template is listed there. And that does not get submitted in MICIP. It does not get sent to anybody at MDE. It says that it needs to be, I can't remember the exact language, but something like published and communicated. And what I've been recommending to everybody is after you get those program plans completed, turn them into a PDF and just put them on your transparency link of your webpage. And they need to be available again for any kind of program or fiscal reviews.
All right, and I want you to know a lot of work went into that. The other ones were out of date. There was a lot of redundancy in them. So we spent a lot of time looking at the old law, the new law, removing things, adding things, and then removing all that redundancy that was there before. So if you find anything crazy about it, please let me know. But I feel like this is a much smoother template than the previous one.
So my last piece here was a little bit touched on with Shelley, but this I've had almost every time I talk about with MICIP with somebody, they're like, "Where's the submit button? How do I know that it's submitted? When's it due?" Basically, once your goals move into the portfolio, then it's considered to be submitted. So you're not really submitting it to anyone. There's no submit button. There's no done button. It's just once you get to where your goals are in the portfolio, that's when you are at the spot where it's going to be visible to MDE or other people. So like for myself, I can go in and I can see that you guys are working on MICIP. But if your stuff isn't into the portfolio, I can't see it. So I can see it once it gets into the portfolio, for example, and it'll be the same way with MDE. So you need to get the stuff into the portfolio. And at that time, you can consider it as submitted, for lack of a better word. So we had talked earlier about a September 1 or June 30th. So June 30th is what I would call like a practical deadline, because typically that's going to be when we are going to do our consolidated applications, or will be due. And so if it's not in MICIP, you can't hit the drop downs for Nexus. Obviously this year we know that Nexus isn't out yet, but that's like the practical deadline. But I have been talking to people where it's like, hey, let's get the stuff in there. If you have some stuff for Nexus this year, let's get that in there, but we can finish some things up later. So I'm working with some districts where we're getting the bulk of it done now, but we're having some meetings in August to finish it up. Really, it's not, the PA 25 says that our school improvement plans are due on September 1st. And so that's really the official deadline. So there's kind of a practical deadline, but there's also an official deadline. And so really the main piece out of this though is after we get through this first year, none of that should really matter. We should be always keeping it up to date and always thinking about the new goals and always updating things, and on a continuous basis, keeping things updated and keeping it where it should be. And if we're doing that, then we're always going to be in compliance. So so try not to think about it as this linear thing that it falls due on this date. Really try to think of it as a continuous process. And if we are getting in and doing things on a continuous basis and having good conversations with our district teams and then keeping things updated and changing them as they change and finishing things when they finish, starting new things when we're ready, then it's going to always be there and it's always going to be ready. That's
Right,
a major mindset shift.
Yeah, and so keep in mind, anything you do between now and even amendment time, any adjustments you make along the way after even your initial, it'll show up in the amendment, so it'll pull through. So if you added some new things or whatever, that'll pull into Nexus at amendment time. So keep that in mind. And I did talk to Terry, and that's pretty instantaneous. Like Dave said, once it's in the portfolio, it's automatically going to speak to Nexus. So it's not like you have a waiting period or anything like that.
So I know that's a big mindset shift, and it's actually kind of hard to conceptualize. I think we just kind of have to live it. And so I think everybody's been doing a really good job of trying to get into MICIP, get the stuff entered, get stuff, do the best we can to just learn the system this year. And that's all we really need to be doing. And we'll keep working through that in the future as we kind of start going through that first year. But hopefully people are having really well-established district teams that are going to look at this on a regular basis throughout the year and make those changes, make those updates, monitor the plans that they're putting into place, and we'll talk through all that as the year progresses. Okay, so we are hitting up to our time that we are going to get into some individual meeting slots. So if you do end up with some specific individual questions, then we can maybe address those during our individual meeting slot times. If you can't make it to one of the meeting slot times, or all the times got eaten up or whatever, I have my technical assistance day. My office hours are on Thursday from 1 to 2:30, but anybody can reach out to me at any time. And I know Shelley is available for you to reach out to her individually with questions as well.
So Dave, I have a question. I know we both have meetings. Am I staying on this link? Do you have a different link for you?
Yep. So I'm just going to make breakout rooms.
Okay.
So if you leave and then come back, if you want to come back a few minutes before your scheduled time, just pop back into this same Zoom. and Shelly and I will be in breakout rooms, and I'll pop out and put you guys into the right breakout room when it's your turn. All right, so with that, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna stop the recording. And
Dave, I just wanted to toss out there, I see that all of Shelley's times were hogged, and so if someone on the